Hi everyone, I'm Rachel Forrester from Cert Systems. We're the people who help you deal with people, especially when there's a potential for conflict or when times are difficult. And right now, New Zealand is going through what must be one of the most difficult patches that we've actually ever had to face. I'm fairly sure that I'm speaking for most of us when I say it's been a bit stressful. Our expectations have been changed, our goalposts have been moved. Small decisions are now huge decisions. For some, our kids are at home all of the time. For others, we're on our own a whole lot more. We're also spending far more time with our families and those who are currently sharing our bubbles, which, although a blessing in many ways, can also be pretty testing. For those of you who haven't done our training, we give people skills to safely interact with others in tricky situations. We call this tactical communications, which simply means communicating effectively with people to achieve a purpose or an outcome. When we deliver our 2-day situational safety and TACCOMS package, we teach it with the overarching view that our communication skills are actually our greatest asset when it comes to keeping ourselves safe. There are 10 principles of tactical communications, and a few of these in particular have really struck a chord with what we need during this time. The first of these principles that I'd like to share with you today is quite simply, remain calm. Sounds simple? In practice though, not so much. It's actually really difficult to remain calm when the world is literally in an absolute turmoil around us. The problem with this though is that then we find ourselves in a state of stress. Stress is damaging long term, of that we are certain. So what happens to our bodies when we're under stress? Firstly, we produce 2 stress hormones, cortisol and adrenaline. Medical research has recently shown us that an ongoing production of cortisol is incredibly damaging for our long-term health. So we need to do all we can do to minimize it. As for adrenaline, well, we're all familiar with that one. We've all felt it. It's an indicator of that fight, flight, or freeze mode kicking in. So what actually happens to our brains when we moved into that mode? Acute stress, for whatever reason, does one really unfortunate thing. It switches off an extremely important part of our brains, the prefrontal cortex. This is unfortunate because our prefrontal cortex actually has a really important job. It's where we get our decision-making skills from. It's responsible for logical thought, for planning, our fine motor skills, all of our higher thinking. And it's a very sad indictment that it's also the first thing to leave the building when we become stressed. Because then, unfortunately, the part of our brain that comes to the forefront is our amygdala. Our amygdala is part of the limbic region, which is a very primitive part of our brain. It's responsible, quite simply, for keeping us alive. It's our fight, flight, or freeze mode. And it's also the reason that when we're in an argument with somebody that we just can't think of that clever response at the time. 2 hours later, however, guaranteed we'll come up with a piece of gold that we didn't think of. The amygdala is also all about reacting rather than responding in a careful, well thought out way, and we know how that gets us into trouble. So we now know what happens to us when we can't remain calm. The thing is, what do we do about it? Firstly, recognize it. Recognize those triggers that show that we're becoming stressed. Watch out for things like shallow breathing, panicked thoughts, lack of ability to think logically. Recognize it and observe it. Secondly, practice mindful breathing. I know being mindful is something of a buzzword at the moment, but it's actually incredibly useful. Deep, diaphragmatic breaths, count the in-breath, count the out-breath. This then gets oxygen into your lungs, then into your bloodstream, and all of these things will help that prefrontal cortex switch on again. There are a number of really useful apps out there at the moment for your phones which will help with this sort of stuff. The Calm app is one that really stands out to me as one that's really useful in times like this. Look, if you can and it's appropriate, try and take a physical step back in those stressful situations. Or if you need to, walk away for a bit. Go outside if it's possible, pat the dog, listen to music. Remove yourself from the situation if you feel like you're getting to a stage where you're starting to react rather than responding appropriately. It's important to get that prefrontal cortex switched back on again as soon as we can so that we can actually function properly. Trying to remain calm is such a simple concept, but it's one that eludes us when things are tough. Try and remember though, that very few great decisions were ever made when we've been panicking or under a great deal of stress. That's it today. Hang in there, read the silly memes, try not to hook into the wine too early, and above all, let's be kind to each other. Thanks so much.